Mercifully, the series is over. Derek White, big corner three. Pacers don't get an offensive bucket last 3.5 minutes of the game. Yes, I thought they were throwing up some crap in the fourth quarter. Yes, I think the Pacers are a good young team that I'm not sure would win a playoff series in the West. I'm not sure if they would. It is what it is. Sports predictions are fun. I've been wrong on the Dallas Mavericks all year. So I thought OKC was going to beat them. I thought Minnesota would beat them in 7. I mean, once they got, Gafford, PJ Washington, they're a different team. Kyrie's playing real defense, but I've been wrong on that. This is the easiest sports prediction in the last year. Celtics make the finals. Then you throw in the injuries. I don't know what to make of Indiana. TJ McConnell, they've got Pascal Siakam I've liked forever, but I kind of felt like this is one of those games where I appreciate the effort by Rick Carlisle, but I wanted the series to end. And I try not to root. I just wanted this series to end. Am I a bad guy?
No, we did not need a game 5 of Pacers Celtics. One of the things that's really fascinating to me about that particular series is like Boston was capable at any moment of strangling their offense the way they did over the final few minutes. But Indiana, and credit to Rick Carlisle, they have crazy ball and player movement. They'll get 5 interchanges within like 10 seconds, and Boston switches a lot. So like when they're not really engaged, they botch switches and guys will break open and someone will just end up breaking open right underneath the basket. But anytime they actually communicate and put in the requisite effort, they're actually, I don't know if you remember, Colin, do you remember that 2022 Celtics team, the team that made the finals? They played hard on defense every single night. And it was scary how good Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, Marcus Smart, and Derek White could be when they were really engaged defensively. And like, honestly, we talk so much about the offensive end with Boston, and they certainly have some frustrating things on that end of the floor. But when they really lock in defensively, they have 4 awesome, versatile perimeter defenders. And
Derek White's fantastic.
Yeah, they can strangle the life out of teams when they really want to. Now, the question is, do they have the habits tied in tightly enough to beat a really good team from the West? We're going to find out. But yeah, like that punch for them has always been there. They just don't throw it as often as they need to.
Yeah, and, Jalen Brunson now has a big contract. Porzingis, Holiday, Tatum. These are richer dudes. They also know they're big favorites. There is talk that you can't flip a switch, but when I think there's a disparity between teams, like I think Boston will be much more engaged in the finals. Also, I think the last game of the NBA Finals is scheduled for late June. I don't know what they're going to do with this. I mean, are they going to start the finals Saturday night if Dallas closes it out? I mean, they may just. I look tonight, I'm like, how are they going to stretch this out? That's baseball makes that mistake sometimes where people get into these series, and baseball's an everyday game. And then you get into a playoff series and there's 3 days off. Well, it's in the football season. It's October. You lose me. If if I want to watch the Braves and the Dodgers in the NLCS, you can't go 3 days off. You lose me. So I don't know what the NBA is going to do with their final schedule, but I do think Boston's a team. This is a team now. You go Marcus Smart to Drew Holiday. A little more of a legacy player. Porzingis has made some big time money, been viewed as a unicorn, a star. So I think it's hard when these guys look at Indiana and they're terrible defensively. They're awfully young. They probably wouldn't be here without some injuries to the Knicks. So I think, I was thinking about this, Jason. The 2 easiest ways to win a championship. It's to be part of a dynasty. Those are hard to construct, but once you have it, you have lots of players, usually a great coach. Dynasties get rolling, play with confidence. So, once you win your first or second with the Bulls, the third feels like it's easier. The second way is as an underdog that comes out of nowhere with no pressure. Dirk and the Mavericks over the Heat. The hardest way to win a championship is when you don't have one yet. We're expecting one for years, and you go in as a favorite. And I look at this Boston team, Dallas, I'm thinking, we just put this thing together. We just shuffle the cards, threw it on the table. I think Boston is going to have a lot of pressure in the finals.
There's going to be a lot of pressure, and they're not going to, in all likelihood, Luka's the best player going into that series too, which is another interesting element.
Yes. Yep.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned from this Dallas-Minnesota series is that we got to stop looking at the championship picture within the context of individual teams, but rather look at it through matchups. Because you go out of the second round and you're like, oh man, Minnesota, look at what they did to Denver. They have everyone's number. Clearly, they're the best team in the league. And it's like, well, actually, they have a very specific weakness, which is rim protection, because Anthony Edwards loves to get downhill and attack the rim, right? You go against Denver, who can't protect the rim, and you go against Phoenix with Yusuf Nurkic, who can't protect the rim, and it's just slicing and dicing them all series long. All of a sudden, Dallas has a freaky athlete in Derek Jones Jr. to put on the ball, and an elite couple of rim protectors in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, and they look flummoxed. They look like they don't know what to do when the game really slows down. And so I have to kind of take that into the finals as well. And as we look into the finals, if it ends up being Dallas-Boston, Luka's going to be the best player in the series. One of the biggest issues for Boston, and it's a big part of why Indiana scored on them as effectively as they did, Boston has been the worst pick and roll defense in the playoffs to this point. And a lot of that has to do with Porzingis being out. But what do we know that Luka's going to do? Luka's going to pick on Al Horford every single opportunity he gets, just like you're seeing Indiana do so often over the course of the series, picking on him whenever they have an opportunity to in ball screens. And so honestly, there's a lot of advantages that Dallas brings to the table. That said, Boston does just have a ton of talent, and they have one specific thing that I think is super fascinating. Jayson Tatum is one of the few athletes in the league who's actually big and strong enough to cause some issues for Luka. And so I think that's kind of an interesting matchup piece going into that series. And so I don't necessarily think that that Boston's talent or Dallas having survived the West means anything. We got to look at this in a vacuum, and Boston has a lot of advantages. Dallas has a lot of advantages. It's going to be really interesting to dig into, but you're right. Boston is going to go into that series a substantial favorite. I think right now on DraftKings are already something like minus 220 to win the title. There's a ton of pressure.
Yep.
Again, if Jayson Tatum does get badly outplayed by Luka in that series after what happened with Steph in 2022, that would be a disaster. So I do think pressure will play a role, but I think Boston being at home to start helps. And the big time off helps a lot too, because you were talking about the final schedule. It's set. They're not playing game 1 till June 6th. So if Dallas wins tomorrow, there's going to be 8.
Is that true? June?
Yes,
6th.
there's going to be 8 consecutive days off if Dallas wins tomorrow. Couple things there. Luka's got a bad knee. That's really good for his knee. Kristaps Porzingis, a little bit of extra time to get back from that calf injury. So we could be seeing very different versions of both of these teams when we get to that point. For what could have been a much more entertaining conference finals, Dallas-Boston feels like a pretty damn good NBA finals. Aren't you excited about that?
No, I think I said this today on FS1. I worked today, and I said, this is as good as it gets. I have a huge brand in the Celtics with 2 stars who have played together for years, so people know the story. I've got Mark Cuban and Dirk Nowitzki made the Mavericks. They punch above their weight. That's a real brand. It's not the Lakers, Warriors, Celtics, but it's a real brand. You have 2 stars, one of them controversial, Kyrie Irving. You have the Boston Kyrie factor. You have the pressure on the Celtics to finally, come on, guys, you've been to a final, so you're going to have a favorite. This is as good as the NBA can do. I mean, I love watching Denver play, but I don't think they break through nationally. I don't think Minnesota does. I don't think OKC does. I think the Knicks will if they can get a Paul George or one more highly effective wing player. But this is really good. I think it's going to be a great final. I didn't know. I was just sitting here looking tonight. So you're right.
Isn't that crazy? Right. That's a long break. That's a whole playoff series.
Well, you're lucky that, because baseball's had long breaks, and it's just a killer in October because there's a college football or pro football. I mean, Fox is now running college football games on Friday. You just can't do that in football season. You can do it now. It's funny. My takeaway, I said this on the air today, if Porzingis plays, I like Boston barely, but I do think, I'll tell you a series it reminds me of. 2000, Blazers, Lakers. The Celtics of the Blazers. Blazers had Arvydas, Steve Smith, and Scottie Pippen, and Bonzi Wells, and David Stoudemire, Rasheed Wallace. They had more quality players than the Lakers did. The Lakers had Kobe and Shaq, and a really experienced coach. Multiple times in that series, the Blazers gave them fits. Lakers couldn't stop Rasheed Wallace. There were multiple matchup issues for the Lakers, but they had Shaq and Kobe. And I kind of feel like the league's never been this gifted offensively, ever. That's never looked like this. And increasingly in these series, it's just like, who's going to get the shots? I mean, Minnesota is the best defensive team in the league. People were targeting Rudy Gobert. It's like, that's the best defensive player. Go after him. It's a different ball game. When you got 7-footers that have to come and defend the perimeter, it's a different world. And I could just see this series, aggressive teams win. They went and got, first of all, they hired Nico Harrison from Nike. Then they get Kyrie. Then the trade deadline. They took big swings. And sports reward. So there's an aggressive culture with this team. And don't you feel a little bit like Dallas with Kyrie's temperament feels like we should take advantage of the opportunity we have? This may not be in the oven.
This might be 1 year.
Right? Like
1 or 2.
Well, yeah. Don't you think, Jason, there is a sense with Dallas, like, let's get this. This is the time. That Maverick Dirk team, it was a jambalaya. It was a bunch of stuff thrown together. That the tarmac wasn't very long on it. So I the more I think about this, I'm like, man, it feels like 7, and it feels like Luka's going to hit a shot. It really does. Like, it's so hard for me. That Blazer-Lakers series, I felt 6 games. Hell, I felt going into the fourth quarter, the Blazers were the better team in the series. And then Kobe and Shaq do their thing. Do you have a strong feeling either way?
Yeah, so I find the dynamic to be super fascinating in the sense that Boston is this super talented team. They have 4 guys that make over 30 million, and they all deserve to. If they all were free agents tomorrow, they'd all make over 30 million. Yeah. And then Derek White is the one guy who doesn't. He makes like 18. And if he was a free agent tomorrow, he'd make 30, 35 million because he's so
he'd have a huge
he's arguably their second or third best player. I'd say probably their third best player, right? And so like they have an absurd amount of talent. It's very equal opportunity. We've joked on the show. It's like vibes. It's like you take this possession, you take that possession. It's like when they won game 3, it's like Drew Holiday just decides to randomly attack Pascal Siakam at the end of the game and get a bucket.
Jason, even Al Horford has nights. Al Horford could drop 23. You'd never be shocked.
Yeah, they almost look like a different version of themselves every night. Whereas like Dallas, it's like every single Dallas Mavericks basketball game I've watched since Luka got drafted has looked more or less the same. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's a corner 3-point shooter, there's a lob threat, and then there's a guy on the opposite wing, and then there's usually a secondary creator, whether it's Jaylen Brunson or it's Kyrie Irving or it's Spencer Dinwiddie, right? And so what I find fascinating about the build is like this to me is the maximized version of the Luka Dallas Mavericks construction, right? You've got Luka playing the best basketball he's ever played in his life. You've got the best number 2 he's ever played with, Kyrie Irving, who's playing the best basketball he's played in a long time, right? And he's also defending at a much higher level than he has in recent seasons. They've got legitimate wing defenders. Derrick Jones Jr. was a veteran minimum contract who's been one of the best perimeter guys in the league. He's done an awesome job on Anthony Edwards in this playoff series. PJ Washington has been super valuable for them in all 3 rounds. And then they've got 2 vertical spacers, right? And so in Gafford and Lively, and both of them have been big time defensive threats for them at various points during the season.
Yes.
And so what I find fascinating is it's very much like a star driven construct with guys playing super focused roles. Guard the other team's best player, hit a corner 3, protect the rim, screen and roll hard with Luka. Like they have super focused roles versus Boston, where it's like everyone's kind of a Swiss Army knife doing something different on any given night. Even defensively, they'll have Tatum guard a center. Yeah. They'll have Drew Holiday guard a center. They'll put Al Horford on Pascal Siakam because that's an archetype he had success with. So it's like, I find it really fascinating that they're 2 very, very different team constructs. That said, like one of the things that I worry about for Dallas in the series is they have the ability to put some more size and strength on Luka than Minnesota does. What I found really interesting in the Thunder series, Lou Dort, built like a linebacker, caused Luka some problems. Jaden McDaniels, a more highly regarded perimeter defender, is getting bullied by Luka because he's skinny and gangly, and Luka can just shove him off and get wherever he wants. Tatum's got some real size and strength. Jaylen Brown is a more strong and stout lower base than a guy like Jaden McDaniels. Drew Holiday is a famous fire truck built, really low, strong kind of base. So they have a lot of big, strong bodies to throw at Luka. And then the second piece of it is one of the big reasons why Minnesota's offense is struggling so bad in this series is they're really struggling to get the ball to the weak side, and Anthony Edwards is struggling to dissect their defense with their aggressive coverages. Boston is awesome at getting the ball moving around to shooters, and like they will get you in space. And one of the things they did until Halliburton got hurt, they literally every single time down the floor were targeting Halliburton. Every single time, whether it was through Tatum and Brown or Tatum and Derek White, or whether it was through Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday, they were attacking him every single time. They will do the same to Luka, and they will try to wear him down. And so I would say that I lean towards Boston as well, but I do believe that this Dallas defense is really good. And if they can play Boston into some poor shooting performances, if a guy like a PJ Washington or a Derek Jones Jr. can have a similar effect on Tatum that some other guys have had in the past, like Andrew Wiggins did in the 2022 finals. If they have some success there, I think they have a shot, but I would lean Boston at this point.